Onboarding reps. How do we reduce leadership workload by up to 80% and increase retention rates by 2 to 5x? So the first thing I'll cover is the university, and not talking about sales recruiting university, but a new hire training university. So university, role play AI, coaching AI, and then ultimately structure. So these are kind of the four systems that we can help a client develop. Their new hire training university, role play systems, coaching systems, and structure. Now for you, Maverick, obviously you guys, if you have 40 sales reps, you probably at least have four, in the field sales managers, maybe up to eight-ish or something like that,
Yep.
right? And you guys are doing eight figures, you have local leadership, you're doing door-to-door training, like you guys are crushing it already. So you already know how to train reps. This is just gonna, improve the retention rates and, ramp up timelines for the sales reps. But for context, Patrick, the university piece, really what this is about is automating the informational side of the onboarding process. So, if you were to start me this coming Monday, in 99% of the cases, I'm not going to just show up and know magically everything about the A to Z opportunity. And there's things that need to be, taught, right? I need to be clear on the daily, weekly, monthly activities to ramp up into success. I need to get a good understanding of who I'm selling to, which is the ICP, the ideal customer profile. So a deep understanding of who I'm selling to, a deep understanding if I'm on the closing side of the sales process of what I'm selling, so what the solution is I am selling to the ICP. And then ultimately, the most important thing on the university or the informational side of the onboarding process, which is what we call it, is how do I execute the sales system, right? What's the cold calling demo, proposal process or door knocking, in-home sales presentation. Everybody's going to have a little bit of a different model. We can talk about nuances today if you guys want to, but really the first part of onboarding is like that informational side of the onboarding process. You can either do this live or you can automate it via videos, documents, and quizzes. And for you guys, we can build out and automate that process in your own learning management system, right? So Maverick's company is Vivid Windows. We would create something like Vivid University. And inside of Vivid University would be everything informationally that a rep needs to learn about the A to Z opportunity, videos, documents, and quizzes. Instead of their local leadership or Maverick spending 10 to 20 hours, regurgitating the stuff that a rep needs to learn, we automate that. Allows them to save leadership time, but also what we like to do, because most companies will, teach the content once and reps will forget maybe up to 85% of it. We like to structure it in the structure part of the onboarding process to have reps go through it at least two times in the first 2 weeks. So the main thing here is that there's an opportunity to automate the informational side of the training. Reps need to go through it two and up to four times, depending on how complex the information is. And there's a way to structure that in the first 2 to 4 weeks. So as an example, let's say it's a 10 module university, right? So module one all the way through module 10. The way that we like to structure this out so reps get through it quickly and also retain the information versus forgetting 85% of it is, in an example where there's like 10 modules, rep would go through modules one and two on Monday, three and four on Tuesday, all the way through, modules 10 Monday through Friday. And then they would, be required, for lack of a better terms, to go through that a second time in week two in the same structure, module one and two on Monday, three and four on Tuesday, and maybe continue that in up to weeks three and four, depending on how complex the information is. And so what this does is it automates the info, and then also allows the rep to actually retain the information by going through it again 2 to 4 times. So this is the first thing that we can help you guys develop. That's kind of the anchor, automating the informational side of the onboarding process. That's a huge piece. All custom branded to your company, your brand, your sales model, nothing general. It's all custom built. The next thing that'll be more, applicable to you guys, probably Maverick, because you already have your own custom university, is Roleplay AI. We have a platform called Rep Coach AI, Maverick. And if you can imagine, you onboard me, if canvassing and setting appointments is foundational to the sales role, obviously that's going to be the case if I'm a canvasser. If I'm managing the full A to Z sales cycle, that's also foundational to the role. But if whatever communication stages in the sales process are important for me to learn, so the canvassing script, the in-home sales presentation, or whatever the nature of your model is, Patrick, I'm not looking at your details, but whatever core communication stages exist in the sales process, those are things that ideally reps master. The ideal cadence, which is really difficult to scale with live leadership, even when you have a large leadership team like you guys do, Maverick, is actually getting reps to practice the pitch 50 times. So we have a platform, Rep Coach AI. Rep Coach AI allows us to take your ICPs, your ideal customer profile. So for you, Maverick, it'd be like a homeowner, you know, the tough homeowner, the wife homeowner, the nuances of the types of customer experiences that you approach on the doors. We can kind of get all those nuances, create AI, customers, and take your scripts, your objections, your FAQs, all the communication stages of your sales process, upload that into Rep Coach AI. And if I'm a rep, I can log in and practice with, Joe, the AI prospect homeowner, and practice the pitch and have a real conversation without your time investment or your local leaders' time investment, get feedback based on how those role plays are going, get scored 72%. You need to fix this, this, and this. And I can actually automate the 50 pitches, which is the ideal if I want to maximize retention. But you can automate role play and kind of create whatever experience you want there. So if you can imagine, reps are going through the university in a cookie cutter way every single week for the first 2 to 3, 4 weeks. Reps are practicing the pitch, 5 times a day on autopilot without the leadership time investment. There's a leadership time investment in terms of getting reps access to it and understanding if they're actually going through the process to ensure that they're on track with the onboarding system. But in terms of the actual training, that time reduction is massive. So automation of the information, automation of the role play. The next thing is coaching. Coaching is, just coaching based on real sales conversations. It's much easier to execute this automatically with inside sales or video sales or phone sales. More difficult to do with outside sales for you, Maverick. But anyways, Rep Coach AI allows you to record live conversations or upload audio conversations and get feedback based on those real sales conversations. So this is one thing that you have to kind of get reps to do if you don't have some type of recording tool that you use today. But I can be a rep with Rep Coach AI, the app, and I can be on the doors. And if I'm, in your case, I got to be a rep that's really wanting the feedback and I'm really looking to get better, but I can record my conversations and submit those recordings and get feedback based on the exact scorecards custom to your sales process that were uploaded when Rep Coach was developed. And so reps need also, and you guys know this with your 4 to 8-ish leaders, whatever the number is, they need coaching based on the real sales conversations they're having on the doors or in the home. And it's that coaching based on the real customer conversations that is helping close the kind of learning gap. And so our same platform that automates role play can automate coaching as well. You can record live conversations if it's outside sales, inside sales, Zoom sales. You can record audio. You can upload audio recordings. If it's inside sales or Zoom sales, you can just hit record and automatically record phone calls or Zoom calls and get that automated coaching. But this is another thing from a management perspective that's really difficult to scale, but really important in the retention process. And these things can be automated. So when I said at the beginning, you can have up to an 80% time reduction in the onboarding process. It's because of these getting automated. And also the reason I say a 2 to 5x increase in retention rates without, exaggeration is because of just the nature of the training that they get, right? Information multiple times, 50 role plays, coaching sessions, ideally 10 times per communication stage within your sales process. If any of this language doesn't make sense, just let me know. But the fourth thing that we can do, and these are more like sales training systems. The fourth thing is structure. And structure is a little bit nuanced. I'm going to spend a little bit more time there, and then we'll do some Q&A. But the fourth thing that we can build out for you guys is, hey, what's the roadmap up to financial success or the bare minimums that you expect for a sales rep or quota? For most companies, that's going to be a 30, 60, 90-day, maybe up to 6-month ramp up for more complex B2B opportunities. But what's like the macro ramp up into the opportunity? And then also what's the micro kind of onboarding process, which is the first 2 to 3, 4 weeks. And then also ultimately, how do you kind of bring all of this together and launch reps into a better onboarding structure? So in terms of structure, there's a few things. So onboarding structure, I kind of call this the macro structure. This is important for recruiting, onboarding, and management. So, if it's not obvious in the recruiting process, ideally you're being as clear as possible and what it really looks like to ramp up into the role. If you guys haven't been through the training yet, in step 6 of the group interview presentation, it's about the sacrifice, and that's the sacrifice to ramp up into the position. Every opportunity is going to be different. You can have a entry level, canvassing opportunity that's literally 2 to 4 weeks to ramp up, all the way to a highly technical full sales cycle B2B opportunity that takes 6+ months to ramp up. But everybody's going to have some type of, macro ramp up within their opportunity. So most companies are going to be like in the for like a core sales position, a 60 to 90-day ramp up. So just for the sake of illustration, we'll assume 3 to 4 months. Okay. So what I do is I go, hey, for our opportunity, what do we expect reps to do annually, like from a revenue perspective? If I'm just looking at like a core sales position, what does it look like from a revenue perspective? And what does that kind of look like from an annual income perspective? Let's say, I expect 800 grand or something like that. And that equates to roughly whatever, 6 figures in income, which is, 8K per month. Okay. This is kind of important to me. So in the recruiting process, I'm communicating those details. So, hey, what it looks like to ramp up into this position, it's a 3 month ramp up. And if you follow our system over a 3 month period, over a, 90-day period, 12-week period, you're going to land at making at least 8K per month minimum by the end of 90 days. Maybe you'll get there a lot sooner. So these are nuances that are starting to come up in the recruiting process, but they get even more important in the final interview. And then you're recapping on these things in the onboarding process. But in terms of structure, this fourth topic, and the reason I'm covering this now, is an important thing to map out for onboarding is what it actually looks like to ramp up into whatever bare minimum income expectations you're communicating in the recruiting process. So if it's 100K bare minimum, which is 8K per month, and it takes 3 months to get there, will I kind of start to draw this out, or think through this in whatever way that you want to? And again, we can help you design these things. But I want to reverse engineer as much as possible exactly what the activities week to week are going to look like to accomplish this. And so if I'm assuming they're going to make 8K in this hypothetical example in month 3, well, then I want to think through what are they making in month 2? Okay, this is just an illustration. Let's pretend it's 5K. And then in month 1, it's 2K, right? So I kind of start there. Hey, what's the income opportunity conservatively? What does it look like to ramp up into that from a monthly perspective? If I were to reverse engineer to the best of my ability, what it looks like monthly from an income standpoint, what does that look like? And so then I go here, think through the income to the best of my ability. I want to be conservative. And then I start to go, okay, from an income perspective, if a rep were to show up and accomplish, being on track for this at 3 months here, what are they actually doing weekly to ensure that? So weeks 1, 2, 3, 4, what are they doing every single week to ensure that they at least make 2K in month 1? In weeks 5, 6, 7, and 8, what are they doing to ensure that they at least make 5K? Weeks 9, 10, 11, and 12, what are they doing to ensure they at least make 8K? And so kind of the macro structure of your onboarding process starts to get communicated in the recruiting process via the group interview at a very high level. Questions will come up in the final interview and you'll get more detail there. But then you'll get more in depth in the onboarding process because clarity for the reps is incredibly important. If I'm a rep and I get sold into a 6 figure income opportunity and it takes me month 3 to get there, well, obviously I'm not as excited about this month and this month as I am for this month. So it's about, hey, I need to have clarity because my confidence is in the structure and the system and the clarity that I have until I'm actually making money. Meaning that if I'm not making, the 6 figures on track earnings yet, it's like, where's my confidence? I can have confidence in myself, but I need to have confidence in the company, what I'm selling, the nature of your systems, and then I need to believe that I can execute everything, right? So one of the controllables that you guys have is, hey, we can help them be confident who we are as a company, confident in what we sell, and confident in the nature of our structure. The more I believe that you guys have a good structure, and the more that it's cookie cutter, meaning, hey, Ryan, do this week 1, this week 2, 3, 4, and at a bare minimum, you're going to make this. And I have that confidence there because you've laid out the structure and you've been absolutely clear. That's going to help me get through the more important period, which is those first 90 days and sticking through that timeline. And so that's kind of like the first starting place. You can call that, again, the macro structure. This starts to help you understand, kind of this area here. And every opportunity is a little bit different, but the first 2 to 3, 4 weeks are crucial. After you understand, like at a high level, what activities need to happen weekly, in this example, 3 months to ramp up into whatever, the income is. In this example, it's 8K. Then you can get more granular in terms of your structure. And I call this, again, like the microstructure or the initial 2 weeks of onboarding or the 2-week new hire checklist. The first 2 weeks are really critical. Okay, and again, these are a few topics all linked to structure, this fourth thing that we can help you dial in because it's about having the training systems, them getting the information, the role play, the coaching that needs to be developed. And once it's automated, it improves onboarding and training and retention rates and reduces leadership workload. But then you bring everything together with having good structure. So the first thing is the macro structure, then it's the micro structure, call that the first 2 weeks. And really, what you want to do after you understand exactly at a high level what needs to happen in the first 2 weeks to be perfectly on track for success in the macro ramp up, then it's mapping all the activities that need to happen daily. So these are sales team meetings, end of day meetings. These are the activities. These is, going through the university of role play coaching, connecting with the manager. So, in Maverick, in your example, there's things like new hire orientation, doing your 2 sales team meetings a week, uh, connecting with John at the end of the day, Wednesday, to go into the field for the first time, going through modules 1 and 2 on Monday, going through 5 role plays on Monday, on Tuesday, going through 5 role plays for the canvassing pitch. So all those nuances that are critical in the first 2 weeks to ensure that me as the rep are perfectly on track for success, ramping up into the position, that's ultimately what gets done in the kind of the micro process, more granular in those first 2 to 3, 4 weeks, because those initial couple weeks are really important. So if you guys can imagine, like in checklist form, you have your first 2 weeks, right? Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And it's, hey, on Monday, here's the 5 things that you need to do to be perfectly on track for Tuesday. And if you do those 5 things, you're going to be perfectly on track for Tuesday, which means you're perfectly on track for the 90 days and ramping up into your 6-figure income opportunity. On Tuesday, here's the 7 things that you need to do to be perfectly on track for Wednesday. If you do those 7 things on Tuesday, you're going to be perfectly on track for Wednesday, et cetera, et cetera. So all of a sudden, what this does is it creates, 50 tasks in the first 2 weeks, and that allows structure to come in and for there to be absolute clarity for leadership and the rep. And just a side note too, this also acts as a really good kind of additional filtering system. Okay, because if you provide absolute clarity and you provide the details of what a rep needs to do every single day in the first 2 weeks, and a rep does not follow this, well, at the latest by the end of 2 weeks who's in and who's out and who's engaged. So it's also a good, like very good objective tool, black and white, this person's in or out, right? So if a rep gets to day 4 and they're still on Monday's tasks and they're like missing meetings and stuff like that, you just know, boom, you're done. If they follow week 1 perfectly, hey, John's really engaged, Sally's really engaged. I think they're in. Leadership knows to pay a little bit more attention to them because they're following the system that we've clearly laid out for them. If they make it to the end of week 2 and they followed the 50 plus tasks, very likely that rep is going to continue to be engaged and ramp up into success, especially if the income starts to get decent in the first 1 to 2 months. So the second piece of structure is those initial 2 weeks. And then the last piece is kind of bringing everything together. And this is like for the owner, for leadership, how do they actually kind of launch this off? If I were to hypothetically recruit 4 reps this week, how does this practically look for me in implementation this coming Monday for new hire orientation? So that third kind of area and structure is, we'll call it the schedule. Okay, so we'll drop Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And I'm going to draw this up and make it cookie cutter, but some of these events are not going to be the same for you. It'll paint a picture of what it kind of looks like. So for you, Maverick, I don't know all the details of what you guys are actually doing. It seems like reps go to leadership really quickly, which is good because you want them in the field quickly. Sometimes you can do a little bit of this more corporately and let reps funnel out in the first 2 to 3 days before they get to leadership and start wasting leadership time. But those are kind of nuances that may be interesting to talk through. I'm going to draw some cookie cutter events up here. So this is new hire orientation. We'll call that 10 to 12 p.m. on a Monday. Doesn't have to be, but just for the sake of illustration, it's no more than 2 hours and it's on a Monday. And then other kind of events that are going to be on the calendar for leadership are going to probably be some sales team meetings of some kind. For the sake of illustration, let's just say those are Tuesdays and Thursdays at 10 a.m. as well. So we got new hire orientation. That only exists when I'm onboarding new reps. Sales team meetings, that's an ongoing management function that's on the calendar already. So I'm drawing up the things that are like a management time investment to paint a picture of the time investment piece. And then as it relates to onboarding and structure, what we have found to be valuable is an environment for, and this is obvious, but for reps to answer their questions in an efficient way for leadership. And if you can imagine the university and role play being automated, university and role play, well, obviously those are big reductions in time for leadership. And they're also downtime kind of tools, meaning that if I'm going through a couple hours of a university a day and then an hour of role play a day, well, that's a DIY, do it yourself kind of training environment for 3 hours a day, 15 hours per week. So I'm doing that by myself as a new hire without the leadership time investment. And so those are tasks that are on that daily new hire checklist. And so there's tasks that reps are doing on their downtime that benefit themselves and benefit the company that don't require the live leadership time. But there's still going to be questions that reps need to get answered. And it's like, what's the most efficient way to do that? We have found a good kind of cookie cutter way for reps to get live support, to have a good management experience, good company experience, to protect leadership's time and to provide like a group kind of coaching environment is because the university automates the informational side. We're just trying to, get their questions answered in a live environment. You can do these things via Slack and email and text, but that's not as valuable as live support is for reps. So, in short, what we have found is an end of day 30-minute meeting every single day, ideally, doesn't have to be, but every single day is the best experience and best general end result for a company. And so these would be, if you can imagine the first 2 weeks, that micro onboarding process, these are kind of the time investment kind of management things that happen. The sales team structure may be different. Company may do 1 or 5 team meetings a week. They may want to do new hire orientation at a different time. They may want to do end of day meetings at a different time. But in this illustration, if you can imagine, that's the time investment piece. And then behind the scenes, you have the clarity of the onboarding process, which is this is what it looks like from a macro perspective. Here's the micro perspective, the first 2 weeks. And reps come into new hire orientation, and this is where things get kicked off, obviously. And the big focus here is you bring reps in and they've been recruited. They went through the presentation and the group interview. They fleshed out to the best of their ability their questions in the final interview. They've signed their agreement. They're here on new hire orientation. So they're ready to roll at some level, right? And the goal here is to get them what they need as soon as possible to protect leadership's time and for us to move on and figure out as quickly as possible who's in and who's out. There's a lot that can happen in new hire orientation, but the most important piece is to get reps access to what they need to get access to for those first initial 2 weeks of tasks and to provide absolute clarity on everything that they need to do in the first 2 weeks to be perfectly on track for success. Some things that can happen in new hire orientation are reps come in, we set an agenda for what we're going to do in the next 90 minutes to 2 hours. We do a round robin, introduction. Hey, let's do an introduction. Where do you live? What was your last, kind of job experience? Why did you decide to work with Vivid Windows or whatever, right? 60, 30 to 60 seconds. Let's do a round robin. And then you let everybody kind of speak up, get a little bit comfortable, whatever. And then there's, it's kind of nuanced, but typically what you would do is you'd go, hey, what I want to do is do like a quick admin tech check. There's things that are really important for you guys to have access to in these first 2 weeks. The first 2 weeks are crucial, which is going to be the majority of what we talk about today. But let's make sure we have access to a few things. So you guys have access to ABC University. You got an invite before this call. Check your personal emails right now, or the company emails that we set up for you already or whatever. And let's make sure that you have access, that you've set your password and you know how to access ABC University, right? So you kind of do a check and make sure that they have access to everything because the purpose of new hire orientation is, if you can imagine, I got 5 reps that come here. I want this to be dummy proof, meaning that I want them to have absolute clarity in the first 2 weeks, every little task that they need to do to be perfectly on track for success. And if you can imagine, I'm a new rep. I come out of new hire orientation. New hire orientation was my first task on Monday for my 2 week new hire checklist. And then I got my task for the rest of the day, like go through modules 1 and 2, go through 5 role plays for the canvassing pitch, set up Sales Rabbit or whatever, join the end of day meeting, right? And then on Tuesday, sales team meeting, do modules 3 and 4, do 5 role plays at the canvassing pitch, uh, you know, connect with John, the manager, at 3:30 p.m., do X, show up to the end of day meeting. And so the basics, we're kind of doing a flyby of this process, but the basics of what you want to happen in new hire orientation is absolute clarity on the onboarding system and every little tiny detail that the rep needs to do in the first 2 weeks to be perfectly on track for success. So by the time that they get to the end of new hire orientation, they know exactly what the next 2 weeks look like, and they're not bogging down leadership, and they're just simply following the checklist. I do this, I do this, I do this, I do this. End of day meeting, that's Monday. Do this, this, and this Tuesday. You're perfectly on track for success. And then you got 25 plus tasks here, and you just want reps following the system, right? Some of this is live support, some of this is in the field on the phones, etc. At some time in the first week, typically, some of those tasks are actually going to be sales activities. Um, but new hire orientation are things like we do round robin, we make sure they have access to everything that they need to get access to. We demo the university if you have that. You demo the role play system if you have that. You recap on the macro expectations and ramping up into the position. You spend the majority of the time recapping in depth every single task that is on the 2 week new hire checklist because that's the main purpose. You finish off with any Q&A to make sure everybody knows exactly what they need to do in the first 2 weeks. And then you recap Monday's tasks because that's on their first day of the checklist. And it's like, all right, these fools are going to do it or they're not. Then you go into week 2, which is technically on the onboarding checklist, and it looks exactly the same, excluding there's not a new hire orientation meeting because that's week 2. And so you got this 2 week checklist. And so that's the third-ish piece of structure, and that's more like understanding the schedule. So the structure piece is kind of the macro ramp up, because that's important in the recruiting process, important in the onboarding process. Um, and then kind of the micro, which is the first 2 weeks, all the miscellaneous tasks. There's typically 4 to 8 daily in the first 2 weeks. And then understanding, okay, how do we actually roll this out to a new rep that's coming on board? And the starting to understand that is by understanding the schedule. So anyways, all of that I just covered are things that we can help custom develop for you guys. And from my perspective, it's the most valuable thing that we do now. So we can go to questions.
Question I have is so, and this is one thing I need to implement and know that I needed to. It's kind of I just had maybe a brain fart or didn't implement it. Is we always ran at the company I was recruiting for before. We always had like a new hire orientation, and I don't know why that totally slipped my mind. You said that, and I was like, holy shit, Mav! Like, why are you
Yeah.
not running a new hire orientation? Because you know what
Yeah.
I mean. They'll get paperwork, they'll get the things, but it's kind of just like, hey, where do I go? What do I do? Who's in
Yeah.
charge? Blah blah blah. Once you finish, well, let me recap here really quick. Um, on the university, is it like so we run our own like Vivid University, like how it's structured out and different things like that. I personally haven't went through and done it. I obviously need to and kind of see, where it could improve, where it could get better. Because I know we already have our own, but if we could implement it and make it a little bit more of like a coaching university rather than a hey, watch these videos type. It's like, hey, video, what did you learn? Questionnaire, not more or less like a quiz, but just like a questionnaire of like, hey, what'd you get right? What'd you get wrong? Did you pay attention? And
Yeah.
then kind of to follow up with that is if you do the new hire orientation, everything in week 1, how do you start out week 2? Do you start it at the beginning of the next week, like on Saturday or Friday night at like your end of the day call and just say, hey, this is what you should be doing next week? Or do I run a new call on Monday saying, hey, week 2, this is what you should be expecting?
Yeah. So for you, I kind of assume that just to protect leadership's time a little bit in those first 1 to 2 days, my assumption is that you handling new hire orientation via Zoom corporately may be a beneficial thing to the leaders.
Right.
And you let them get through their first day, and then on day 2 they connect with their leaders in the sales team meeting because you'll have that initial attrition Monday, and so that'll save a little bit of time but also save the manager a half a day on the Monday with onboarding reps, so they'll love that, and that'll probably be best. But anyways, to answer um, your question was in the second week, where did the tasks start, like
Yeah,
what
like where would I get it? Because dude, you know how sales is. You freaking
yeah,
tell someone to get something done, and it's like, especially
yeah,
if you're commission based, it's like I'm not going to get done unless I'm getting paid for it or X, Y, and Z.
yeah,
But kind of in my notes, what I put in here is you can kind of use the first 2 weeks. is like an incentive to earn like a new hire swag pack or something. It's like, hey, if you have
Yeah.
everything done, run incentives. I mean, it sells. We freaking love swag and all that. You know how it
Yeah.
is. They love the
Yeah.
BS stuff. Anything that's
Yeah.
not like money, right? That is money to
Yeah.
them.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I feel like, hey, going into week two, it'd be like, hey, you completed week one. Now, if you finish week two, here's your, incentive. But just to
Exactly.
kind of not lose that spark of Monday, you did a new hire orientation, they're pumped
Yeah.
their first week. How do you
Hmm.
keep them pumped going into week two of like, hey, you need to like not even get pumped, but like how to know like, hey, maybe they're doing it or want to do it or gonna complete it?
Yeah. Well, for you, because you guys have you and kind of the resources and leadership, and you guys can kind of divide and conquer. I assume that you are doing this, right? And you're the one that sets up the system and provides clarity around the system. The managers need to know the system, okay? Because they're going to support and answer questions to reps as they plug into the system. The managers are doing this, right? And then the question for you would be because it is nuanced and it's going to be hard to get the 4, 6, 5 managers on the same page to do this end of day support thing. The question is, hey, are we going to handle this end of day Q&A? If I want to do this, are we going to handle this corporately to ensure it happens every single day and to ensure, Ryan, the sales manager, doesn't skip it, right? Because if you got 6 sales managers and you now understand that the end of day support is important, then it's making sure all the leaders are doing it. Or if you feel corporately you have the time and it's better for the company for you to do it, then you would handle that via Zoom corporately. So the reps come out of this and they know, okay, this is, Maverick, director of recruiting and onboarding, whatever. I'm going to meet because he's explained the 2 weeks of tasks. I understand tomorrow morning, this is just hypothetical. I'm going to meet my sales manager at this office, right? I know this is via Zoom because I'm here, and these are via Zoom corporately because this is an onboarding task that happens in the first 2 weeks. And so leadership, you sales reps know about it. And sure, you kind of understand if reps are following the task and how engaged they are. And if they're dummies, they won't be clear because you've laid it out clearly in new hire orientation. They've got the process. If they're showing up here, they're starting to ask questions. If they're
Yeah.
showing up to the sales team meeting, they're asking John, the sales manager, questions. He ideally understands how to answer those questions. Then the rep is showing up here. And then if I'm engaged all the way through first week, in this example, I've done 8 meetings with leadership at some level, and I
Yeah.
should have absolute clarity on week two's checklist. Weeks two, if you can imagine, this is not here, new hire orientation. Well, Monday is just, there's no sales team meeting that day, then maybe it's, meet John at 2 p.m. in the field, based on your assigned territory, right?
Yeah.
And then your question, which was a great one, is, okay, how do you kind of, you know, clarity on the tasks is because of the nature of the system, the clarity from you and local leadership on the system, the meetings, them being involved and asking questions. So they're idiots if they don't understand what Monday looks like if they're still there by Friday. So that won't happen if
Okay.
they're engaged at that time. But the other question is what can I do to help engagement and throughput through those initial 2 weeks as they get kind of through their learning curve? And that's the incentive piece, right? So
Right.
that can be the swag stuff or financial, whatever. Is it canvassing and closing, or is it I'm managing the full A to Z sales cycle, or both? Are they door-to-door reps managing the full A to Z sales cycle, or is it canvassing?
No, so we run setter closer model. So essentially
Yeah.
all they're doing is knocking the door, pitching like a model home to a homeowner, scheduling the appointment.
Yeah, right. So, you're gonna have a 2 week checklist, right? Ramp up to quotas, probably 4 weeks. And for you, you could do, if you got your 2 week setup, you guys probably have the resources to kind of do, like you said, the swag bag or some type of
Yeah.
financial thing. So, at the end of 2 weeks, you guys have the ability because of you. Um, Two, once this is all set up, to understand if, because there is the admin piece of it, like checking rep coach. Did John, the rep, go through 5 role plays today, which was on Tuesday to check? So those things are can be difficult and time intensive if you want to track those things, which are
Yeah, but
helpful.
God, I feel like the first 2 weeks you kind of just got to block it out, just like from our side, because like you're the
Mhm.
busiest person ever in your own head, right? But you're like, I'm really not that
Yeah,
busy. But I
yeah,
feel like if you want to, especially in sales and in the industry, it's like you got to kind of baby these people for like the first 2 weeks if you want them to help like find success. It's like, hey, dude, just get this done, and then like, hey, I'm
yeah.
glad you made me do that because I helped, whatever.
Yeah, but for you guys, your macro, right? Macro would be 4 weeks, right? Hey, to ramp up a quota in the canvassing position, really simple. It takes 4 weeks. by the end of 4 weeks, you'll be at least setting 12 appointments a week with a 50% show up rate, six, whatever, right?
Yeah.
And so you're setting expectations. And then in onboarding, you're providing absolute clarity on the micro, which is the first initial 2 weeks of tasks. And then you say, hey guys, once you're past your first month and you're doing a bare minimum of XYZ daily, weekly, you're making at least whatever, 5 grand per month based on our compensation plan, whatever, right? In the first month, we provide some incentives and additional training pay. So we have a very specific process. It's simple to follow. All you have to do is follow the process. After the first 2 weeks, you get XYZ, you get a swag bag, hats, polo, whatever you want to do there.
Right.
And then, so that could be a cool additional thing if you want to add that. But typically, you guys are thinking about swag. You understand that's like cool for reps to have. But usually, I'd have a company like throw a $2,000 bonus at the end of month or at the end of month one, at the end of 4 weeks for hitting all the tasks perfectly in the kind of the macro. So if the rep does the first 2 weeks of tasks perfectly on the checklist, and they get their 8 appointments in week three and 12 appointments at quota in week four, and they hit all those bare minimums perfectly in the first 4 weeks, $2,000 bonus. And that's like kind of a carrot at the end of 4 weeks. If a rep makes it to that point, it's financially somewhat conservative for the company, although that's still on top of compensation, their normal compensation plan. So you can provide like a activity-based training bonus at the end of month one. And that's an incentive to follow the cookie cutter process because they only get that if they follow the cookie cutter process. And if for you guys, you implemented like swag into that, that would just be kind of a cool bonus from my perspective.
Okay. And then so, and I mean, this might be too much I'm asking for this call, or maybe we can set it up for another one, but I would love to like set up of like what 4 weeks, like what we can make. Like I think 2 weeks wouldn't be that hard, but I think when you're getting into week three and week four, they're kind of gonna be like, oh, like it kind of gets draggy. Do you think that, or is it like, hey, you just stay on top of them, it'll be fine, or do you think it's better just to ramp them up for 2 weeks and then three and four, it's like, hey, let's see what happens?
Help me understand what you mean there, because
So, so
you're
I'm
thinking,
talking about, so I'm talking about kind of like what's on the board behind you, like what needs to be completed, and maybe I'm thinking not in the right headspace because it's like, hey, week one, this is what should be done. Week two, this is what should be done. Do I need to go like, hey, week three, you need to do this. Week four, you need to do this, or is it like, hey, week one and week two are the most important. Three and four is like, hey, it's time to play. You're on the field. Let's see what
yeah,
happens.
for you, the first 2 weeks are plenty because really you would only extend it to weeks three and four if the sales activities are radically different.
Yeah,
But for you, it gets cookie cutter by Thursday or Friday, meaning, by
right.
it's like Wednesday, second day in the field with your manager. Thursday, you got universities modules 7 and 8. Do 5 role plays with the canvassing script. Go to your sales team meeting. Knock your first 50 doors. Right? Friday, da 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 da, 50 doors, 50 doors, or whatever. Right? So
Yeah.
that's cookie cutter. So if they're getting into the rhythm by the end of week two. If the sales activities are something radically changed from a daily perspective going into week three, then it would make sense to provide that clarity.
Okay.
But
There
if
we
it,
go. That clears it up for me a lot
yeah,
more.
but the leadership should be able to take it past the first 2 weeks.
That's
Really,
what I was saying. Because I'm like, I thought I was like, damn, he just said 2 weeks. I'm like, I don't know how to get him to freaking keep
yeah,
ramping it up for four, but 2 weeks makes more sense, especially coming from, actually have done the job and done the things like that. Like after 2 weeks, it's like, hey, if you can't freaking set an appointment after all this training after 2 weeks, it's like, one, you're not putting in the time, or two, we've totally fallen short of you and you haven't gotten enough training. So it's kind of
yeah,
is what it
yeah,
is.
yeah. Love it.